How are we doing, folks? Your host Moose here on the Pitt Panthers Football Network as we welcome you to the Season 7 Offseason episode number 2, our recruiting special, where we take a look at our final recruiting class as we head into National Signing Day with 4 major targets on the board: Justin Wilson, receiver; Darren Johnson, defensive tackle; Jamal Brown, guard; and Matt Wright, the strong safety. Players that we're after, trying to sign 4 open scholarships, 4 players. Can we get them all to decide that they want to come play for Pat Narduzzi and the Pitt Panthers? So it would be absolutely fantastic. It would be the cherry on the top of a fantastic recruiting class. And so let's take a look at who we're able to snag and bring into Pitt. Of course, National Recruiting Day, National Signing Day, I should say, always so dramatic, so many twists and turns, just trying to get that final fax, that final digital commitment over the line. And with 4 guys here, considering the Panthers, who are we able to sign? Darren Johnson is in, Matt Wright is in, Jamal Brown decides to commit to Troy of all places. Marcus Smith, who we considered going after, defensive end, goes to Penn State, and Justin Wilson commits to Western Kentucky. I don't know about that one. I guess he probably figured he wants an opportunity to play sooner rather than later, knowing that he'd likely be at or near the bottom of our depth chart, at least coming in. He decides to go somewhere where he has a more immediate opportunity for playing time. A couple of interesting players. Jake Perry there had us at the top of his board, didn't sign him. We didn't offer him a scholarship. Matthew Archie, though, receiver, I had offered him a scholarship, didn't sign, even though we were top of his board. Josh Stovall, outside linebacker, top of his board, doesn't sign. Dion Sewell, top of his board, doesn't sign. But here we go. Jamal Brown, NC State was favored over Pitt. Georgia Tech was in the mix as well. He doesn't end up going with the Panthers, decides to stay closer to home, and ends up taking Pitt off of his board. Justin Wilson, we just didn't put enough points into him, didn't favor him enough. He didn't feel wanted enough, and he decides to go to Western Kentucky. Brandon Scott goes to Navy. Good player, but one that we didn't really have interest in signing. Talib Parker, a middle linebacker, goes to Georgia. Missed out on him. Same with DeMarcus McFarland, goes to Purdue. Daniel Wood goes to Akron. Stevie Mosby to Louisiana Tech. Marcus Smith, he looks like a fantastic, incredible player. He ends up going to Penn State. I think he's going to be a guy that we're going to be sorely upset that we didn't bring him in. I would love to have another good defensive end. But on the bright side, Matt Wright chooses to come to Pitt. And the biggest thing you can see here is UCLA didn't put, I think we were ahead 145 points or something of that nature. We put in 6,000 points to him, and he signed by more than 6,000 points. What that tells us effectively is UCLA must have signed another safety, and so they didn't need Matt Wright anymore, and they just decided to withdraw all their interest, which means we basically wasted 6,000 points on him. So if we had known that, then of course we wouldn't have needed to pump so many points into Wright, and we could have maybe got Jamal Brown, could have maybe got Justin Wilson. Instead, we have to be happy that we did sign Matt Wright. We did sign Darren Johnson, defensive tackle. He's a little bit undersized for a defensive tackle, and looking at his skill set, he's a pass rushing defensive tackle. So I'm actually considering the possibility of moving him to defensive end, especially because we've signed a couple defensive tackles in this class. We have a couple of young defensive tackles as well. I think it might behoove us for Johnson to be kind of a hybrid defensive tackle, defensive end, similar to what we saw with Malachi Bordeaux. Played defensive end for us for a couple of seasons. Eventually, we moved him to defensive tackle last year, and he had 7 sacks. He'll finish his season this year as a defensive tackle with hopefully double-digit sacks is what I expect out of him. But you can see our overall recruiting class finishes 23 signings. We had 21 signings ourselves. I said we had 23 available, but we only had signed 21 through players I actually offered. That means there's 2 walk-ons that decided to sign. That will, on a case-by-case basis decide if they should make the roster. But here's a look at our recruiting class of everyone that we signed in the 2022 recruiting class. Some really good players, and here's where the create a player or create a recruit, join the dynasty aspect comes into it. You guys remember it from every single season. Players on this board are open for you to state your case for who you would like to become. Basically, what you should leave in the comments is the player you'd like to replace. And with that, the player you'd like to replace, so you give me who they are, what name you'd like to change them to, what 2 numbers that you favor. So obviously if your first choice isn't available, maybe your second choice will be. What gear you'd like that player to wear, what helmet, do they have a visor, gloves, etc., stuff like that. And then a little bit of a backstory, and that's the biggest thing. The guys that give good backstories and things like that and have, convincing, or not convincing, but, player stories that I enjoy and add some depth to the storyline. I love bringing in and love featuring. And here's the thing. There's a few players on here that are not going to be renamed. DeAnthony Hamilton, not going to be renamed. Jordan Murphy Jr., not going to be renamed. Who else? We got a couple of players that aren't going to be renamed. You can still put in your suggestion for who you'd like to become. If you choose one of those players, though, I may choose to use your selection to rename somebody else. Or what I'm going to do this time is then a person that puts in their name as they want to become a recruit, but they don't get put as a player on this team, I will put you into the recruiting class for next season. And depending on who you are and who you want to become, I may either just edit somebody on our recruiting board into that player, or I may make you a custom recruit and you'll be one of those superstar recruits that can go anywhere. We'll see, depending on how things shakes out. But you can see we did get 2 walk-on signings. Anthony McAfee from Texas. He's a defensive end, one of the worst recruits we could have signed. And we did get a receiver, albeit a walk-on receiver, a very fast player, but one who's probably not going to make too much of an impact for us. But I'm considering keeping him along for the ride on the roster just because we did want to add another receiver. He's not the one we wanted, but maybe he can develop into something down the road. Matt Wright, though, huge signing, 4-star, 78 overall already, so he's definitely going to be in the mix for both of those open safety positions right off the get-go. And we have a number of great recruits. And if you take a look at our recruiting class, you can see we signed 6 players inside of the ESPN, or 7 players, I should say, inside of the ESPN 300. 2 players, I think, in the top 100. A number of really, really good 3-stars. A very heavy 3-star class, as I implemented a few recruiting restrictions on myself for just the quality of players we could sign. If you're interested in those, go check out my thread on Operation Sports, the Football Dynasties thread. You can follow along and see all of the house rules that we have for this particular dynasty and how we run it and whatnot. But we end up with 7 4-star signings, 15 3-stars, and a 1-star who's our long snapper. So pretty good recruiting class. Ends up 7th in the nation. Alabama, Penn State, Oklahoma, and LSU really cleaned up, as did Clemson, on the 5-star recruiting trail. And the big thing with Clemson, they signed some absolutely stud defenders that they are going to have one of the best defenses in college football for the next 4 or 5 years. It's just unbelievable. LSU, conversely, decided to just take every good offensive player, decided to get some signings. And there's a ton of big players here. I'm going to scroll through and you'll see the top 25 recruiting classes as they shook out in the Dynasty this season. But I'm very happy with the recruiting class. Of course, I would have loved to get the offensive linemen. I think we're going to have to start worrying about our offensive line. Not for next year. I think we're still going to be pretty solid, all in the 80s more than likely for our offensive line next season. But the year after we have a couple more graduations, the depth there is looking a little bit thin, so that'll be an area we'll want to focus on next year. Same with quarterback. To be honest, you never know how soon CJ Kirk might decide to go to the next level if he's able to. But you look at the top 100 recruits, of course, a number of these early folks are custom recruits that were created. Darius Rogers-Cole goes to Alabama. Raheem Boone, Wendell Flowers, fantastic middle linebacker. Kayshawn Anderson, defensive end, goes to Clemson. Jaden Maxwell Jr., quarterback, goes to UCF, so that's a huge signing for the Knights. Kai Brooks Jennings, fantastic running back, goes to LSU. Of course, JT Granger, the third, incredible corner, 5-star corner, decides to go to Tennessee, so we'll see him next year. Some really good players here. Tyler Christian, of course, goes to Clemson. We know all about him because we tried to sign him this year. It was Clemson, Alabama, and Pitt trying to sign this middle linebacker. We didn't sign him, which then led to us, we fell back on our other options. Eddie Jones, JUCO middle linebacker, is going to come in as a sophomore. I think he's a very good player. I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do next year. Guy I'm really excited about seeing, Tyler Williams at 5-star tight end. He went to Alabama. And here's a very interesting player, Brandon Dorsey, 5-star athlete, number 7 athlete, 6'5", 211 out of New Jersey. He had Pitt as his number 1 selection, but he just never progressed. He was one of those players that I don't add players to the recruiting board late on to take advantage of the 4- and 5-star players who just don't decide that they want to go anywhere. Basically, if nobody's giving them interest, they just choose to stay uninterested. And he signed with no one. Pitt was who he favored. So what I'm thinking with him, he's a fantastic player. B power, B accuracy as a quarterback, A speed. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back, get his ratings, or at least come up with some comparable ratings to make him 77 overall, whatever it might be. And we're going to put him in the class of 2023, next year's recruiting class. He's going to be in that class as a JUCO. Something with his academics for Brandon Dorsey. He just ended up having to go the JUCO route for a season, or to a prep school similar to a Larry Fitzgerald or to a LaShawn McCoy, who both are, of course, are Pitt stars. But he decided, I have to go that route, so I'm not going to be able to go to Pitt, and I'm going to have to go elsewhere and decide what to do with my future from then on. So we'll see him in the recruiting class next year. Could he be a potential replacement for CJ Kirk? That all remains to be seen, but definitely an opportunity for him there. Joey Williams, another quarterback to be very excited about. His projected overall says 81. Spoiler alert, he's not an 81. He's something along the lines of an 86, 87 quarterback. He goes to Cincinnati, so very interesting to see there. He's an Ohio prospect. I thought maybe Ohio State would be in for him. Instead, Cincinnati able to snag him. Penn State also, you'll notice, got a fantastic quarterback, Singletary, who was interested in Pitt from the get-go. It was Pitt and Penn State down to the end of things, but because of us with having CJ Kirk, he decides to go to Penn State. So again, another really, really good quarterback that we may miss out on. Mac Ball, middle linebacker, goes to North Carolina. Unbelievable name. Mac Ball, what a guy. That's an NFL caliber football player name. Gotta watch out for him on the Tar Heels. We'll definitely be seeing him in the future. Some really, really talented players here. James Miller, outside linebacker, goes to Alabama. And that's the one thing you can notice. Jesse McNeil goes to Indiana, so good to see them getting a talented player. But that's the one thing you can notice when you go through this top 100. You see Alabama all over this thing. Michael Holt, middle linebacker, does go to Boston College, so nice signing there for them. We get Jordan Murphy Jr., of course, the corner, and we got Darren Johnson, the defensive tackle. Naquan Ellis goes to Georgia. He's a creative prospect. Antoine Wright, the quarterback, goes to Texas A&M. Another creative prospect. Cade Shipley, who doesn't make the top 100, does decide to go to Louisville, so another guy we'll see in the ACC. Julius Mills, athlete, had Pitt in his considerations. He's a running back, decides to go to Ohio State. So a ton of guys with interest in Pitt that you can see that decided to go elsewhere. Shannon Hill goes to Alabama. Some really, really solid players here that are going to be in the Dynasty getting moved over. So with that said, guys, one final look at our 21-man recruiting class. And of course, like I mentioned before, our creative prospect. I'll leave kind of the template in the description of the video. Let me know in the comments if you want to replace one of these players in the Dynasty, who you might want to become, what you want to change their name to, what numbers you'd want to wear, what gear you'd want to wear, and any kind of compelling backstory that you can think to include. It doesn't have to be crazy, of course, but any backstory just to add something about the player. It doesn't have to be dramatic. Doesn't have to be a sob story, because not everybody has one of those. Some guys just worked hard and got to where they wanted to be. Other players did that but had some adversity to go through along the way. But whatever it is, anything that you think is interesting or would be fun, for sure, feel free to throw it in. Don't forget, we got some good players that you don't want to overlook. Our punter. Our punter's 83 overall already. That guy could be in the NFL, and you could see him in Madden Dynasty continuing down the road. So you can get some longevity out of that player. But as always, guys, that's our recruiting class. Let me know what you thought of our signings. Let me know who was the biggest player that you think we missed out on. Was there anybody in that top 100 class that you saw that was interested in Pitt that you wished we would have signed? For me, it's Mac Ball, middle linebacker, of course, because we need a middle linebacker. But I think it's a great recruiting class. I'm really excited to move into next season. Moving forward, we're going to have position changes that we'll have to shake out to get the best possible team that we can have. We'll have off-season progression, which will be a bit interesting. I got a new wrinkle and a new twist that I'm going to throw into the offseason progression. You guys knew I already had been doing that in previous seasons, but we got a new wrinkle, a new twist that we're going to throw in for this year. We'll go ahead, get into the final roster, look at our team for next season, and we'll be well on our way to starting up Season 7. So as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Hail to Pitt. We'll see you very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.